Like it just isn't how
none of
people
his
talk.
papers are gonna have any research that disagrees with my view of
Like
non-cognitivism.
you don't think experimental philosophy papers will have information that's relevant to the propensity for ordinary moral speakers to talk about moral talk in propositional,
Like
non-propositional
it
ways.
depends. Like if you ask a question of like, oh, there's like surveys that show that most speakers believe that there are true moral sentences. Well, that's accounted for under my view. If they ask like, oh, well, do they think that moral
Okay, let me
sentences
ask what your view is before we continue this up. Very true
um
sentences. What's your
I'm a
view?
prescriptivist, and if it can't be defined, then that means it has no meaning, right?
Okay,
By
you're a
definition, it has a
prescriptivist,
meaning.
but you understand that under prescriptivism, it's still a case that they're not true, right?
No, it can be true
Like
under a
at best, we
pragmatic
would
view.
say truth is being used as a shorthand for "I agree with this" instead
No,
of
they can be true in a pragmatic view of truth.
yeah. Okay, then you would understand like Sarkeesian's research that shows that shows that there seems to be like an insular cultural relativism doesn't work well with prescriptivism because
Um,
at least based on that study, they're explicitly not they're not projecting or agreeing with the prescriptions of those people because that wouldn't work with the cultural relativist showings of that study. Right, like we would expect something more like subjectivism if that were true.
Now, prescriptivism can account for disagreements between cultures.
No, it's not about disagreements between cultures. It's about evaluating moral statements differently based on cultural proximity, such that statements from closer cultures are considered more objectivist. Like they're more like to say these are wrong or these are right, but for more distant cultures, they're less like to say these are wrong or these are right. I don't think that works because under prescriptivism, my take is to be that the yes or no is coming from this is something that I also would prescribe this value to, and I don't know why that would wane with distance.
Uh, I'm unclear on like what the critique is. Like, if I have,
Okay.
if I'm
Hmm.
living in a culture that supports certain values, then I'm more likely to support or prescribe
That's
with
not
those
what I'm
things.
saying. Okay, that's
Again,
no.
I'm
I'll
unclear on
reframe it.
what's being
So
said.
Sarkeesian's research, there's a question. I'll use X as a variable and then I'll give the three cases. So X stabs someone. X kills his son because his son is ugly.
Yeah.
Your classmate, actually, John kills his son because he's ugly. X says that this is okay. Are they wrong? Now, X is either a classmate from your university, someone from the Amazon rainforest, or some other distant culture that's dissimilar to your own, or X is a pentar, which is an alien from a different planet, and the only thing those aliens care about are like proliferating and making more pentagons. The study's results show that people are less likely to consider the pentar statements to be true or false than they are for the person in their culture. So it's not like they're relativists in the sense that, oh, they like it's what my culture says, but it's instead that they evaluate statements from different cultures differently. So it's not an appraiser relativism.
I genuinely don't understand what's being said, like or how this is inconsistent with
What's being
prescriptivism.
said is okay, why do you think prescriptivists would be okay with saying that statements are true? Like,
Well,
is it a shorthand?
under the
Hmm.
prescriptivist view, they wouldn't say the statements are true. Um, well, actually, no. Prescriptivism is silent on whether the statements are true. But like, if I am a prescriptivist and I was evaluating the statements to be true or false, the
Hmm.
prescriptivist might be reluctant to say the statement is true, because they might view the prescription as unuseful, and they might evaluate truth as anything that's useful, right? And so they would say that it's not true. But like aside from like a theory of truth, which prescriptivism is
Hmm.
silent on, I'm just unclear on
I'm
how.
not talking about the context of a theory of truth. I'm instead talking about an explanation as to why ordinary moral speakers describe moral statements in ways that are true or false. Like, presumably, at least my take on it would be some like pragmatic description of affirmation or rejection instead
Well,
of
we'd
like the
need to.
idea that the statement is true or false. Now, if you're saying something other than that, the
That
issue
that's
still
agreed upon
remains
by the
as to
prescriptivist. You don't think the
hmm?
prescriptivist can agree with prescriptions or affirm prescriptions?
It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that's how I would take. That's at least how I would interpret those statements. I'm not saying anything about what the prescriptivist must do. I'm just saying if I were a prescriptivist, that's what I would do.
Okay, so what's the piece of data that's inconsistent
So
with
the
prescriptivism?
piece of data is that their responses show that their moral attitudes are not representative of their personal feelings about the situation, or at least they are not exhausted by their personal feelings about the situation, and instead the properties or like the cultural location of a person being appraised has a significant role in the willingness to affirm, as in to agree with, or to deny and reject a moral statement made by another speaker.
That that's also true given prescriptivism. Like
I'm
not
asking for
sure.
a psychological explanation as to why, based on how the prescriptivist speaker understands the term true to be used in moral context, and why this would be sensitive to the proximity of someone else culturally.
So hold on, wait. Is the question that you're asking me is why are prescriptivists more likely to accept more sentences are true if the person is
No,
facing
not
the
why
most sentence?
prescriptivists. No, no, no. I'm asking for why ordinary moral speakers
Can you
are
write the
more
question down?
likely. Okay, sure.
Why? Yeah, are more likely.
You want? Okay, sure, you can write it out then. Why ordinary moral speakers are more likely to give objectivist responses to people in similar cultures than they are to people in dissimilar cultures, based on how the prescriptivist interprets the usage of true or false in moral discourse.
When you say objectivist responses, what does that mean?
As in they evaluate these things as propositions, and they will say outright, if there's a disagreement, one of these people is wrong.
What does it mean to evaluate something as a proposition?
So in this case, it's the position that if there's a disagreement, that one person has to be wrong. So if X says this is okay and Y says this is not okay, you could rate how if you think one of them has to be wrong, with 7 being they have to be wrong and 0 being neither of them have to be wrong, which would be consistent with prescriptivist semantics. Um, in proximate cultures, it's closer to 7. In distant cultures, it's closer to 0. I think it's 6 and 3 in the original model, and then it's 5 for the middle ground, like the Amazonian tribe.
Okay, so when you say objectivist response, you're saying that the response indicates that the person in the culture is right or wrong, or more right or more wrong.
No, it indicates that they believe in a case of disagreement, there is a correct answer, and that one of those people, the person that disagrees, has to be wrong.
Okay, so there are
And then
cases
this
of
is
disagreement.
sensitive.
Okay, so if I'm in a culture A and culture B is really far away from me, and there's a
Yeah.
case of disagreement in culture B, under the study, what's the response? What's the objectivist
The
response
under
it's
the
giving?
study, they are less likely to say that you have to be wrong, even if they disagree with you. They are less likely to say that you're wrong. So their sensitivity and like their willingness to say that these statements are right or wrong is literally changing.
Yeah, that could be explained by a multitude of things, right? Like
I'm
first,
asking for the explanation. That's the point of the
well,
question.
right or wrong. Yeah, like right or well, first we have to get like an account of right or wrong, right? Like
Well, it's not right or
under the
wrong. It's not necessarily
prescriptivist,
right or wrong. Shit.
under the
Again, it's just like,
prescriptivist
what do you
view,
think the word truth is being used as first? Because that's what question.
the word truth is like independent of my view of prescriptivism. I could take like a
No, no,
pragmatic
but
or
this is about the studies about people saying that statements that someone has to be right or wrong. Okay, so this is the observation. I'm asking for how you'd even interpret the speech act in that observation in a way that allows it to be sensitive to cultural proximity.
so when one individual says that this individual is right, that would just say that they
Mhm.
said something that agrees with their prescriptive set. And when they said that they're wrong, they're saying they have said something that's inconsistent with their prescriptive set.
Okay.
And when they're less or more so reluctant to say that somebody's right or wrong, that could just reflect the
Hmm.
idea that um, it's not true that they are wrong given their social context, right? So, like in their social context, given like social things and stuff like that, it might be right for them, right? And so, like the prescriptive set may differ in a way such that it's justified for them
Okay,
to
you've
hold certain
already
conclusions.
equivocated between two different metrics. The first one is indexed to the appraiser, and the second one is indexed towards some external feature, which would be the culture of a person.
Yeah, because you do realize that the whole point is that if they're closer in culture to you, it's more likely that they're going to have similar prescriptive sets to you. And so you have more confidence in saying that they are wrong insofar as the prescription that they're holding is inconsistent with like large prescriptions within their prescriptive set.
So again, so then seemingly, at least in the first case, it being in equality with yours is superfluous, right? Because it's your cultures. Unless you're switching between them, it would be that it's in it just happens to be consistent with yours. But if you were like Jeffrey Dahmer, I mean, you had like a very queer set of prescriptions, you would still be willing to say it's incorrect to say that murder is wrong if someone in your culture said that. Is that what you're saying? But because if you're not, then you are switching between two different measures.
So like if I'm in like a first world country, for example, I guess, and someone says murder is wrong, I'm in like a nearby first world country, I'll say yeah, they're right, because I live in a society where we're gonna have these beliefs and these prescriptive sets. And so given these beliefs and these prescriptive sets, it's consistent and it's actually encouraged by the prescriptions I already hold to forbid against murder. Now, for someone in like a third world country to say it's not wrong to murder, that's just to say I don't prescribe against murder. And when you evaluate whether they're correct or incorrect in not prescribing against murder, you look at it from their prescriptive set. You say, well, like look at their prescriptive set. They don't have the same prescriptions that we do. There's nothing that encourages them to prescribe against murder, and their social context does not require them to prescribe against murder. And so, why would we say that they are wrong, particularly for not prescribing
You
against
do
murder?
understand, like, we have a truth maker here, right? Like, we have a relevant cultural context that they find themselves within. And then we still have these people being said, like, to be right or wrong in relation to that cultural context. This just is cultural relativism, because the thing being expressed here, like, at best, at best, it's like a moral statement is true if it, I don't know, if it matches the commands of someone's culture. This all seems to be propositional, because if it wasn't
Genuinely, I think that's
propositional,
hilariously false.
I don't think it is, because if it wasn't propositional, the correct answer would be zero in every case.
I know because
I don't think.
you can evaluate truth differently.
So if you think, again, I asked you if you think people are switching between the metrics. If you think they're
No,
evaluating truth
there's no
differently.
metric switch. Like we don't even know how they are understanding the word truth. Like suppose they're
Again, I'm
understanding the
asking you
word
for your
truth.
position on it. I'm aware. I'm asking
I
you
don't have a
what you
position on it
believe.
because I don't have a position on it because quite frankly, my theory of truth is independent from my theory of prescriptivism. So I can believe in prescriptivism
It's not
and yet
about
not
your
hold
theory
theory
of
of truth.
truth.
Sorry, huh?
It's about their internal mental states. Your theory of truth is immaterial here. It's about what's going on when they make these claims. Because if when they're making these claims, for example, the model that they're using is X is permissible if and only if it coincides with one's culture, then, like, if the fair truth doesn't even matter, this is just a cognitive statement. Like, the truth matters insofar as I'm asking you why they stop using true and false and they instead move towards, oh, I don't know, they could both be right, or I don't know, like, no one's right, in cases where, like, the proximity decreases.
Oh, look, I'm gonna have to like look at the study because I've never heard of this study that you're talking about.
Okay, it's like
But I feel like
Sarkeesian 2011, John
yeah,
Kill,
I'll
send
look
it
at
to
it.
you.
I feel as if like once again, like the study itself, I feel like I've already given an explanation for why they might be less reluctant to say that people are right or wrong. Um, if they're
More,
adopting a
not
pragmatic
less.
theory of truth, then it may be the case that they are more likely to be agnostic on whether they're right or wrong, because the prescriptions that they hold in these societies may very well be useful in those particular social contexts, right? And so, if I'm a pragmatic theory of truth, or if I have a pragmatic
Do you
theory of
think
truth,
that captures folk moral semantics? I mean,
bro,
folk
oh my fucking god,
semantics about truth?
Uh, I think that there's independent motivations to believe that, psychologically speaking, when we're making moral statements, we're not in cognitivist states of mind. And so I think that given those independent
I
motivations,
so I don't think that's true. We could get into like dual process models and how the second process is almost certainly engaged in actual detailed evaluation. But that be
that's
damned.
fine.
I'm asking like I'm talking about truth specifically. Like, do you
What,
think that
bro?
the
Oh my
folk are
god.
committed to like a pragmatist theory of truth?
Why do I think the folk are committed to a
I'm
pragmatist theory of
asking you,
truth?
do you think that?
I have no clue.
Okay. So
But
then,
presumably the
why
question you
does
asked
your
me
theory of
initially,
truth matter when modeling their mental states and providing some
well, like
story
here's
about
the
why
thing.
they're giving responses that
I
they
don't
give?
think. Well, here's the thing. I don't think the folk have like a very clear, articulated theory of truth that's going on when they make these statements. And so,
I
the
disagree.
question you asked me initially was, "Can you explain this given prescriptivist semantics?" I explained it. Now
Yeah,
we're pivoting
I
to,
don't think
is
you
this theory
have.
accepted? And like the answer is maybe it is the case that this theory of truth is something that's going on. I'm not sure if the folk, when they're making statements like "it's true that the sky is blue," know particularly what they mean when they say "it's true that the sky is blue," or when they say it's true that, I don't know, Einstein theory of relativity is a valid theory or something. Like when they make these sorts of
A
statements, I
valid
don't know
theory
what's going
of
on there.
that. Uh-huh. Okay. So here are a few things. One, I asked for an explanation. Giving me something that requires empirical backing that you don't have, that also doesn't exist because
It's still an explanation.
obviously it doesn't exist, isn't an explanation.
Wait,
Like at best, this is
I
like
can
a
just give you like
just
basic
boast.
thought experiments.
You could give me thought experiments, but
Yeah,
that
about like how
isn't
pragmatic view
evidence.
of truth.
That
I mean, like,
is
look,
not
if
evidence.
we're okay, wait, hold on. When we're evaluating a model, right? Like a model, or like a theory or something.
See,
What sort of theory of truth do you
unless
think
you're
most people
going
are
to give me
using?
a study,
Like in scientific
I don't care.
enterprise, when people
Because
say like scientific
scientific
theory,
models are verified in relation to empirical observation. It's not pragmatic. Like at best
that's
we
it.
engage into like in best we engage in like pragmatics when moving between fucking theories
That's
that are
just
like
gonna be a
observationally
concession.
identical.
Fuck.
But that's
That's
hmm?
just gonna like what the fuck. You just said okay, yeah, these scientific models are gonna be verified based on empirical observation. That to me just sounds like saying, look, we have this model, we have like this background theory, and if this theory is useful in helping us understand
No,
reality,
it's not
then we
about
consider it to be
useful. It's
true and
about
so forth. You
matching
know?
the data. No, that's exactly what I'm not saying. I'm saying it's about
What does
matching.
useful mean?
I'm not saying it's useful. I disagree with it
Okay,
being
no problem.
useful.
I'll get a definition for you. Useful.
I wouldn't invoke utility because I think this is orthogonal. Do you think there are like scientific truths that aren't useful? And if you don't think that, I think you're retarded.
I think that there are, well, anyways, I think that there are scientific theories that used to be useful, and then we discovered that actually they're
No,
less
like
useful than some other
theories that
theories.
exist currently. No, theories that exist currently. Like maybe I don't know some random fact about how genes exist in some rare species of butterfly. Do you think that's useful?
In helping us understand the theory about the butterfly itself, yeah, obviously is going to be useful.
Okay, so things are useful if they map the thing. Like if they
If
describe
they
the
help
thing,
us,
you consider that to be useful, right? Like that's an
things
example of
are
usefulness.
useful. Things are useful if they are helpful in allowing us to understand certain phenomena, if they allow us to make certain predictions about the world and reality, etc., etc.
Okay,
Right? Those
okay.
are how we evaluate useful.
That's what you mean by useful. If it's sort of like detached from many practical like flaws of Pierce's, I guess. But Pierce's is going to be almost identical to like a correspondence theory given like practical constraints, at least when it comes to like saying that things are drawn up. But like if you'll grant I just don't think this is sufficient to like discriminate against a correspondence theory then. Like every case you described
Bro,
it
what the fuck?
also be true in a correspondence theory of truth. Like
Okay.
sure, I don't know. Like the number, like knowing that there are an odd number of grains of sand on Mars is useful in me learning about Mars. That is information I have that is relevant to like. I don't see how this separates itself. If that's the understanding of utility you're going to fight over.
I'm entirely unclear on how that's a response. If is all you're saying like, look, the correspondence theorists can like
And I'm
explain what the
saying if
pragmatic.
this is your conception of truth, there is no thought experiment you could give to discriminate this conception of truth from its correspondence theory of truth. And I would also say that it is the case that in all scenarios that are relevant, actually, no, in all scenarios that are physically possible that humans could ever find themselves in, this pragmatist and name only theory of truth would end up providing the exact same truth evaluations as a correspondence theory of truth. I'm saying that this is just correspondence functionally, and I don't see how this in any way is going to be sufficient for people to be making these like pragmatic, because this is even pragmatic, at least not pragmatic meaningfully or connotatively.
I think most moral statements are meant to be pragmatic and useful, so that's
I
why I think
disagree. I
pragmatic.
think most moral statements are meant to be truthful. I think they're
Yeah, I
values.
disagree. I mean, like, there's like an abundance of empirical data to disagree with the view.
There's
I mean,
not.
look, I also
Or
disagree
we could
that
go again. We
any.
could go over the studies. Vidali, 2004. I think that's like the first few years all showed objectivism. Later on, it's been called relativism. There has been two studies that have shown non-cognitivism, and based on every reading I've had of the critiques of these studies, that's just because non-cognitivism is near indistinguishable from relativism and subjectivism.
How do
There's
you?
not a
How do
single
you?
well-formed study that has given non-cognitivism like a step in the door, let alone this being like a plausible candidate hypothesis that's
Yeah.
equivalent to the cognitivist theories,
How do you
because
explain
I've
like the
read them.
abundance? How do you explain like the abundance of like religious, like both atheistic and theistic religious texts, as well as like legal codices? that are written in prescriptivist fashion and not in cognitivist fashion. Take, for example, like the 5 moral precepts or the 10 commandments. Like these moral codes are written in commands and not in, descriptions about what is truly right or truly wrong. Why do you think that is?
Because those are commands. The moral code is inferred from the commands. Thou shalt
Wait,
not kill is not a so to be clear, thou shalt not kill is not a moral statement. It is immoral to kill people as a moral statement. I just don't take it to be the case for any of these because these, to be clear, these are laws. These aren't moral judgments.
yeah, they are.
To be very clear, then these are explicitly laws. At best, they are implicitly moral judgments.
No, but the whole, bro, this is like begging the question. Like the whole point is like I consider
No,
these
it's not. I'm
statements.
saying like within the theology, this is
No, that's
explicitly in
false.
bold text the law. It's not explicitly in bold text moral
That's
judgment.
false. What's in question is whether these laws are moral judgments, right? Like
No,
I'm saying,
that's
these
again.
adjudications.
That's not. I said it implicitly could be moral judgment. I'm just saying the primary function of these things in the text. Bold text is that they're laws. For example, that's
No,
why
but
we have
when you say
separate.
laws,
That's
bro,
that's literally what. Wait, that
holy
is
fuck,
literally why Christians
this
today
is
separate
stupid as fuck.
ceremonial from
Look,
moral
if
law.
what you mean by law is a command, is that what you mean by law? Command?
These, sure, yeah.
Okay, if
These
what
are
you mean by law is
demands
a
about
command,
how
then
people
sure.
should arrange themselves, and it's also
Yeah, okay,
important
and
to note that these demands aren't all moral.
I believe that moral sentences are just commands. So if you're saying by law you just mean command, then you saying, yeah, I think it's a law, and it's not moral. It's just say I think it's at least under my view, I think it's a moral statement and it's not moral. My
I'm
question that I
aware of
ask
what your
you,
view is,
my
and I
question that I
think
ask
your view
you,
is. I'm
okay,
aware of
look,
what
you know
your
what,
view is.
you can try, you can do this cope with like the Christian text. I'm not gonna like educate you on like the cultural context surrounding
Okay, so we can talk about Christian text. So the separation between the separation between ceremonial law and moral
I'm gonna
law
wait 10
is
seconds
not
to just
found
stop
in the Old
talking. And if it
Testament.
doesn't stop talking, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
wait,
leave.
it's not found in the Old Testament. Yet it is the case that
I'm
in the Old
tired of like
Testament,
you trying to lie
these are all
about
laws,
context.
which means that the
Them
moral
being laws,
character of
them
these
being laws,
laws
them being
is
laws is only
subservient to them being
inconsistent. Why
laws,
is
at
it keep
least in the
talking?
Christian
Them
interpretation
being
of these
laws,
texts.
them
The
being
idea that all
laws.
of the
Why is
prescriptions
it
in the
keep
Old Testament to
talking?
moral
Okay,
is
let's jump
false,
in.
right? I take it to not be the case that you would. So, for example, I take it to not be the case that you find it immoral to wear mixed fabrics. And if it's not the case that it is immoral for you to wear mixed fabrics, it is also false for you to interpret every prescription in the Old Testament as a moral statement. That's retarded. Like, I don't.
Okay, is he done?
What? Like, the
Okay, so
Old
that's
Testament
like a
just is
separate.
not universally using these
Holy
prescriptions
shit.
as moral judgments.
Okay, is
Go
he
ahead.
done? Okay, fine.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not going to educate you on the cultural and biblical context surrounding why the 10 Commandments were given
I'm
as
not talking
moral
about the Ten
states. Why does he
Commandments.
keep talking? Shut the
I'm not
fuck
talking
up.
about the Ten Commandments. I didn't
Okay, look,
reference
Matt,
the
can
Ten
you mute him,
Commandments,
please? I'm
just.
not going to sit here and let this guy
No.
talk over me. Like he just
You
got done having
Plutus,
a 10
wait,
minute,
Plutus.
10
That
minute
was just
ramble.
no. That was a
Wait,
non sequitur.
wait,
Stop
I
Plutus.
explicitly
talking. Stop
didn't
Wait,
mention
talking.
the Ten
wait,
Commandments.
Stop
Can you just
talking.
let him finish? Can you just let
Stop
him
fucking
finish?
talking.
Okay,
Look,
but I'm not talking about the Ten Commandments.
I
But
don't care
sure.
what you're talking about. You can like keep shadowboxing the point. The point is that I gave both theistic and atheistic cases where there are statements that are meant to be moral, right? Moral just means action guiding principles regarding right and wrong. These statements are in fact principles regarding right and wrong, what you should and shouldn't do. That's how it was understood in the Old Testament. Because it was given to these stop, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You have nothing
Carry on.
important to say. Stop
Carry on.
fucking talking.
Don't
Okay?
cry. Carry on.
It was given to the Israelites to tell them what they are supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do, in a moral sense, in what's right to do and what's wrong to do. And they follow these adjudications to the T. That's the whole fucking point of the Ten Commandments. And my question was that we have the Ten Commandments. Why are they written in commandments, right, and not in descriptions? Like, it is immoral to murder. Why is it thou shalt not murder instead of it is immoral to murder? If it's the case under your view, it is immoral to murder is what people usually think of when giving moral adjudications. And you said, actually, I don't think these are moral adjudications at all. So I said, okay, I'm not going to educate you on whether these are moral adjudications or not. Let's move to the Buddhist example, right? Buddhism is an atheistic religion, right? From a completely different
That's
culture.
not
Stop
true.
talking.
That's false.
Buddhism.
This is a second point. No. This is a second point. No. You got your first point out. No, this is a second point. That's not true. No, you got your first point out.
Mute him.
If you want to finish the first point, you can. But I'm not waiting for 2 points.
Bro, I already said I'm moving on from the first point because I'm not going to educate you on how
Okay,
the
but I'm going to respond to what you said, and then you can go talking about how Buddhism is an atheistic religion, even though the vast majority of Buddhists believe in multiple gods.
Wait, hold on, wait. Can you tell me, like, what's the
Do you
feature?
guys have moderation?
Yes, please. I want to
Sure.
ask you a question.
But
What's
if
the
there's
patron?
moderation, I do want to be
What,
able to respond to what he
what's
just
the
said
patron?
before he starts talking about
Patron. Wait, wait, wait,
Buddhism.
wait, 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 wait. He said that Buddhism is not atheistic, right? Now, obviously, there are different forms of Buddhism, right? Pure Land
The,
Buddhism,
okay,
Mahayana
I'm just
Buddhism,
gonna
Theravada Buddhism.
talk
But like, what I'm
because
going to
I
ask
let
you,
him.
wait, I'm going to ask
I
you,
don't
wait,
know,
shut the
because
fuck
for
up.
some reason it seems to be the case that
I'm mid fucking sentence. Is he like autistic? I'm mid fucking sentence. You keep talking over me. Okay. The question I was going to ask you is, what denomination of Buddhism are you referencing when you say that it's not atheistic? And given this denomination, what is the patron
yeah,
deity of
I'm just
Buddhism?
gonna talk. I'll just keep talking if I get muted. But yeah, I'm gonna respond to what he said originally, and then we can ask like why most Buddhists believe in gods and calling them atheistic is fucking retarded. Um, so the thing I mentioned with like the laws that God gave me Old Testament outside of the Ten Commandments. So I talked about the prohibition of wearing mixed fabrics, for other like ceremonial laws. The point is, theologically speaking, it just isn't the case that all prescriptions are moral. As a Christian, you should know this. You're currently wearing at least two different types of fabric right now. You also eat meat with dairy. It's retarded. Like, and then when it comes to the Ten Commandments, again, the Ten Commandments just aren't propositional. The Ten Commandments can't be right or wrong. That's why I don't consider them to be moral, and I don't consider them to be moral. I could even like grant hypothetically that in ancient Israel, in the 7th century BC, they were non-cognitivist. That means fuck all to today. They spoke a Semitic language. We speak a Germanic language. There's no reason at all for me to believe that our moral semantics track theirs. That's fucking stupid. So even if you were right about the Old Testament's moral code, which you're not, that still has no bearing on my analysis of modern day English speakers being moral cognitivists. Now, to the Buddhism point, most Buddhists believe in gods. Um, so the Buddhism that entered the West is more atheistic, but it's also just less religious in general. A bunch of religious tenets removed. But like to say it's an atheistic religion is extremely strange when Buddhists believe in, even like outside of their actual belief in multiple deities, believe in an afterlife, believe in reincarnation, believe in hells. I should add that to the afterlife section. Believe in spiritual entities that can guide humans. Believe in like divine, all-knowing like fucking progenitors that will come down to aid you in your quest for reincarnation. Like even again, excluding the belief in gods, Buddhism is not isomorphic to anything like atheism. That's stupid. And Buddhism also stems from Hinduism, so it's not like it popped out of nowhere. Buddhism is not like a self-forming moral code. Like even again, this I'll do like what I did in Christian case. Even if I granted that Buddhism is atheistic, Buddhism was heavily influenced by Hinduism and stems from Hinduism. This is not akin to something like secular humanism, which even then is sufficiently tainted by religiosity to me to be comfortable saying its prescriptions are not atheistic. And but I digress. The Buddhism thing's fucking retarded, but you can go now.
Okay, look, just to be clear, the first thing that he said was stupid. Once
Uh huh.
again, to just take the mute him, fucking mute him, bro. I'm not gonna sit here and do this. This guy just he mics up and he just says a lot of rubbish. I'm not gonna do this and have him talk over me when I'm speaking. Okay. So the first thing was I'm not supposed to be interpreting every prescription as a moral statement because I'm wearing two different fabrics right now and I'm not following those prescriptions. Like the basic response for anyone that's like any interested in biblical narrative is just that those prescriptions were made for them for their sake of moral development. So they wanted to develop morally insofar as we're considering right and wrong actions, right? And so in order for them to do this development, it was made for them. So it was pragmatic, it was true for them, it was useful for them. It's all useful for me given what my end is. Okay. And so that's why I don't follow what they do. Like pretty simple fucking response. Um, Secondly, I don't even know what it means to say, oh, these are laws, these are commands. They're not propositions, and so they're not true. That's just a question begging against my view, and that's also just not true as well. Because under some theories of truth, you can have non-propositional truths, right? Like pragmatic theories of truth or deflationist theories of truth. And so, like, I'm kind of unclear on how that follows at all. Um, the point is that most people, even if you disagree with non-cognitivism, most people see laws to be action guiding, laws to be, principles that tell you what to do and what not to do in certain situations. right? If I give you a rule, like you ought to maximize utility, for example, right, or maximize utility in all cases, or let all people maximize utility or something along those lines, that would seem to be a moral statement, insofar as I'm telling you what you should do in a moral sense, but it's not a proposition. Right? Maybe you disagree that it's true or false, but to disagree that it's meant to action guide in a moral sense, not in like some prudential sense or some mind dependent, stance dependent sense, in my opinion, is ridiculous. But moving on to the Buddhism stuff, the reason why I brought up Buddhism being atheistic was just to show that there's a wide scope of religions that have the same motif, i.e., featuring, moral statements or codes that are featured in non-propositional ways. You disagreeing with Buddhism being atheistic is like insane. Anyone that has any knowledge on Buddhism would laugh at you, because Buddhists are notorious for not believing in deities. Um, I asked you a simple question, or like two simple questions. I said, what denomination of Buddhism is theistic, and what patron deity do they believe in? You couldn't answer either of them. The reason why is because a common theme, whether it's Mahayana Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, Sukhavati Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, Tibetan style Buddhism, whatever type of Buddhism it is, a common theme is that they do not believe in deities. They believe in perhaps bodhisattvas, if you're like a Mahayana Buddhist, right? They believe like bodhisattvas, but these bodhisattvas are not gods. They did not create the universe. They do not have the power
Huh?
to forgive sins or anything like that. They are
Mhm.
not all powerful in the sense that you describe. As a matter of fact, Buddhists believe that all existence, right? At least traditional Buddhists believe that all existence is impermanent, right? That's one of the three noble
Mhm.
truths. They believe that all existence is conditioned, which in modern day terms would be contingent. They believe that everything depends on everything, etc.,
Jesus.
etc. So for you to say that Buddhism is theistic is also fucking ridiculous. It's obviously not fucking theistic.
Okay. Is
And
that?
believing, shut the hell up, nigger.
Aye.
Believing in an afterlife, believing in spirits, believing in XYZ is all irrelevant when evaluating whether a religion is theistic or atheistic, because the word theos in Greek means God, right? You can believe in an afterlife and not
Mhm.
believe in God. And you can believe in spirits and not believe in God. And you can believe
Mhm.
in XYZ and not believe in God. But anyways,
Mhm.
the cope that you tried to give, right, in
What's a
response to
deva?
mine,
See. See. What's
the
a
cope,
deva? See.
there's more
What's a
stuff.
deva?
There's more
What's
stuff.
a
Shut
deva?
the
No, no.
fuck up.
What's a deva and
Shut
but?
the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. There's two more things I want to respond to. One of the things that you wanted to respond to, or I wanted to respond to, was you said something like, "Oh, this isn't really good evidence because this was from back then, right? Like I talk about modern speakers today and not back then. Like perhaps that might be true. Maybe I'll see some ground of you that maybe back then they were non-cognitivists and now they are non-cognitivists or something along those lines. But a lot of people are still Buddhist and a lot of people are still Christian and a lot of people are still Jewish and they still, in a way, hold to the truth of these statements and still believe that they are moral. And so it's not a claim about, whether or not it was a time where they believed in these sorts of things. It's how we
Mhm.
evaluate things now. Do we still view these things now as moral or not?
Mhm.
And the last thing I wanted to respond to, which you said, was you tried to duck, dodge, and like leap over the claim or the question I asked you about the Ten Commandments, where I said, look at these, these commandments, right? They are clearly moral. They're trying to tell you what's right and what not right to do. Why is it written in imperatives and not descriptions? And you said, yeah, they're not moral, they're laws, man. How do you explain the five moral precepts? That's the title, by the way, the five moral precepts in Buddhism,
Mhm.
right? So it's called a moral precept, right? So moral precept,
Mhm.
and all of them are imperatives, all of them, every single one. How do you explain those being written in imperatives instead of descriptions under your
Mhm.
view?
Okay, so we're going to go in order. One, just search Deva Buddhism. I don't know where you got this idea from. Buddhists do just believe in God. You can search that in your own time if you want, and you can get back to me on it. But you're fucking retarded. Every major branch of Buddhism, except the ones that have been exported to the West, that have been secularized so that they could be exported, believe in David's. But anyway, next thing. When it comes to like me saying that the Old Testament was written 700 BC, that was not my entire point. My rest of my point was it's also written in a Semitic language, which would be Aramaic and Hebrew. We speak English, which is a Germanic language. We are from a different language family, which means that our language is literally different, which means that the propositional attitudes of statements that may seem to be similar may also be different. So, for example, I don't know. I don't want to get into it, but there are going to be statements that are similar in different languages that convey different meanings. Like they're going to have similar functionals, but they're going to be sufficiently different for say, oh yeah, this statement in German means something slightly different to its English transformation. So that's what I'm saying in that case. It's not just it's really old, it's that it's really old in a different fucking language, and we're trying to choose that different language to make claims about how English speakers speak today. Next thing. Again, it's not so I don't know where you got the idea that like these laws of ceremony they're moral laws. That's not the case. I thought you were a Catholic. These are called ceremonial laws, and they're separated specifically from moral law. And the entire apologetic around this is that these laws specifically are able to be ignored because they were cultural laws that were required for the purity of Jewish people so that they could go to the temple, but because they are not moral laws, we are not required to follow them. You're a Christian, you should know that. Next thing, Buddhism and their five prescriptions. Here are a few issues. The first issue, that wasn't written in English. I don't know why you're trying to like tell me that something originally written in Hindi was translated to English, and because it's all written as prescriptions, and now says something about the English language, it doesn't. If moral's just the closest, I don't know, cousin to whatever Hindu equivalent term they use, it would make sense for them to use moral. But even outside of that, if he's like moral commandments, for example, I take to be the case that murdering is bad has two pieces of content. The first one is like that the statement is correct, and second one is also some like normative force that says, given that this thing is wrong, you have reason to not do this thing. So it would be completely fine if like you had this list of prescriptions and it would just be understood immediately that, oh yeah, this is a law and this is like a prescription, but it's also the case that a prescription is true. And it would be forced to say something like, I don't know, thou shalt kill your dad. Like, thou shalt dishonor thy mother and thy father. Thou shalt steal, thou shalt bear false witness. These are all statements that are wrong. At least I'd take these statements to be wrong. And again, like, as soon as you like obviously like no one, at least non-naturalists and most airfarers, aren't going to deny, and even like relativists aren't going to deny, but moral statements have a prescriptive nature. That's not what's in disagreement. What's in disagreement is if they also have a propositional nature, because obviously like, normativity then some are going to be prescriptive, like you ought to do that, which is anyway. And again, unless you have some actual empirics to tell me, because again, I've given reference to studies, both of them, the conclusion given by the authors were that people are cognitivists. Unless you have some study equivalent to that that tells me what you're saying, I just don't care. And then, as like a final point, you keep referencing like theories of truth unless you are going to like give me some study that shows that ordinary English speakers use those theory of truth, those don't matter. They're irrelevant, right? Like if I have a theory of truth that works really well, but no one's using that theory of truth, it's a non-starter for me to try and apply my theory of truth to interpret the statement of someone that explicitly doesn't accept my theory of truth. But like that doesn't work. It's like me interpreting someone saying God is good as being about Jesus Christ, even though the person's a Hindu. They're not talking about Jesus. They're not talking about the Father. They're not talking about Odin. They're not talking about Zeus. They're not talking about fucking Gojo. Like they're talking about like Vishnu. Like this is why again I asked you if you have like any studies that demonstrate that people use like a pragmatic theory of truth, which you just never sent. So those are all my issues. The first one I do want you to like show me your research about devas in Buddhism. That's what I want you to start with. But I'm gonna go on mute, and it's actually 2 a.m. So you can have a last word. I don't care to
Yeah, this is my
respond.
this is my last response. It's like a waste of my time. So what Plutus did during my response was he searched up what Buddhist denominations believe in gods, and he got, oh look, Devas, right? And he said, look, Devas, they believe in gods. Those are not gods in the sense that's understood today. Devas are not immortal. Devas can die. Devas do not create the universe. Devas are not all powerful. They are not all knowing. You know, they come in and out of existence. They are not gods in the sense that we understand the word God to be. If by God you mean some spiritual being that guides individuals and possesses some degree of power beyond that of humans, some supernatural power. And of course, Buddhism could be understood as a theistic religion because Buddhists believe in bodhisattvas, which for the last time can create things like, you know, different universes. Like, for example, in Pure Land Buddhism, Amitabha Buddha creates the Pure Land. And maybe you might understand that to be a theistic-like being, right? But they're not gods in the sense that most people understand gods to be. They're not these all-powerful creators of reality. They're not these like massively powerful even creators of reality. There are these mortal, finite beings that are more powerful than humans, but not all powerful, more knowledgeable than humans and more wise than humans, but not all knowing. In fact, they're considered to be less than Buddhas, and Buddhas are not considered to be gods. So the research on Deva Buddhism is just that they are not considered to be gods in the sense that we understand gods to be today. But sure, maybe if you understand God in the sense that I just described, which is what the devas are, then yeah, Buddhism, along with a lot of other religions that would be considered to be atheistic, are actually theistic. So I still all have to respond to for the Buddhism point. Flames is a fucking retard. Don't listen to what that guy says about Buddhism. He's Indian. He doesn't know his own religion. It's really sad. Anyway, to respond to the other stuff about ceremonial law versus moral law, like the Ten Commandments are moral law. So what I brought up as evidence is moral law. That's bad for you because you try to say, man, in the Old Testament they're talking about ceremonial laws, man, not moral laws. But if the Ten Commandments are moral law, so moral law, moral modifies the word law, so they're meant to be understood morally, then the question remains, why do we understand morality in terms of laws and not in terms of descriptions, which you have yet to answer? Yeah, ceremonial laws are relevant to my point. I don't really give a fuck about what you're talking about with the ceremonial laws. You didn't answer the question about Buddhism either. So all you really said was Buddhism is theistic. Hey, that's it. The language point is also relevant because I'm not saying that we speak the same way they do. I'm just saying that there are many people that are still a part of these religions today. And these people understand these things to be valid ways of talking about morality. If you go up to any Christian and you say, hey man, what code do you live by? Like, how do you judge what's right and wrong? They'll probably say the Bible, right? I read the Bible. If you go to a Buddhist or even a Hindu and you say, or even a Jainist, you say, look, man, how do you judge what's right and wrong? They'll say, I meditate on the Dharma, right? I meditate, I go to the Sangha and they advise me on the Dharma or something. Or I look at the five moral precepts, and that's what I do, right? If you go to a Confucian, they'll probably tell you about their own ethical codes, which are, surprisingly in prescriptive form, right? They're not in descriptions, they're in prescriptive form. And then that just gives you why is it the case that when we're talking about morality to these both theistic people, like really strong theistic Abrahamic people, and these atheistic leaning, let's say atheistic leaning, just so we don't confuse anybody, people like Buddhism, why is it the case that despite both of them disagreeing on what the morals are, they still conceive of what's moral or what's immoral in mainly prescriptive form? Right? They perceive like, okay, look, I want to know what's moral. I'm going to go to the Bible, and the Bible tells me what's moral in the form of prescriptions. Why? If it's not the case that we usually understand morals in a prescriptive way, and I just haven't got an answer to that question yet. The language point is pretty irrelevant. That's how most people that are experts in the field translate the terms. If you want to say we don't know how the terms are used because it's in a different language from a while ago, then okay. I mean, like it's pretty uninteresting. We have the translations that are most best, used by people, and I'm offering them to you, and these are what the translations say. So whatever evidence we have is on my side as it pertains to translation. And the final thing was like the theory of truth point. I genuinely disbelieve that you think that a lot of people do not hold to pragmatist theory of truths. I think a lot of people are probably pluralists about truths. So they believe not just in one single theory of truth to outrule them all, but they probably have multiple theories of truth. I believe most of the folk are unclear on what they mean when they say truth. If I ask you, what does it's in the same way that most people are unclear on what it means to exist, or how we decide what theories are ontologically limited to certain entities, despite knowing what existence means. They know what truth means, they know how to apply truth, but they don't have a clear, robust articulation of what truth actually means, under my view. And so I'm not even sure if I can make a claim about what most folk mean when they say truth. But overall, I think if I ask questions like, do you think that things that are more useful are true, right? Things that are useful for understanding reality, things that help us make predictions, things that are useful, would you say that they're true, like scientific models or mathematical theorems and etc. etc.? And they'd probably say yeah. And so like I don't really know. Like I mean, if you want the empirics, I don't have them. I didn't come here prepared to debate. You just kind of asked me a question and I came. But that's like my last response, like all of this nonsense. So yeah.
Okay,
Also,
well, I said I was.
this guy. Wait, I
Oh,
want to
you
say
still
something.
going? My bad.
I want to say something quick. I want to say something quick, bro. If anybody here is listening to the debate and is interested about the Buddhism stuff, yes, diva is translated as God. But if you go on any literature ever on Buddhism, it
Hmm.
will tell you that divas are not gods in the sense that we understand gods to be. Right? If you understand God, maybe it's
Okay.
like maybe they're gods in like the Greek sense, like Greek gods. Maybe
And
they're gods in like
Norse.
that sense.
Hmm.
But I don't even know. Are the Greek gods mortal?
The Norse gods are mortal.
Yeah, maybe
Before
like
they
Nordic
died.
gods. Like they can be born, they can be killed. They're not all
Yeah.
powerful.
Also
They're
the
not immune.
Aramaic gods. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
all of that aside, is that all? Cool.
that's
So
pretty much
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, you already made my first point for me. Buddhist gods just are gods. Like every condition you gave either is incorrect or you'd say that 4 isn't a god. Because 4 dies, 4's temporal. Like 4's also not a creator. That's silly. You're like high on Abrahamic shit, and for some reason you've forgotten that the vast majority of gods just aren't triomni. That's like I don't know how you end
That's
up in
not
a
how I was
position like.
accounted from God. Do you
Did you?
think ghosts? Do you think ghosts are God? If I believe in ghosts, do you think I believe in gods?
Why did I say the ghost? Why are you asking me this?
Because like
And
it
why are you
seems like for
cutting me off?
everyone,
Hey, I was unmuted the entire time and I didn't cut you off beyond when you stopped and then you
is
started
this your
again.
conclusion? Because I kind of want to go.
You can go if it's my sure, it's my conclusion. You can go. I'll to say.
Okay.
You said this was your last statement anyway. Yeah. So one, that's not what gods are. If Odin's a god, then we didn't exclude the Buddhist gods. They're viewed as gods. They're prayed to as gods. They're seen as gods. I don't know what he's basing this on. Again, my point about the translation isn't that, oh, we don't know what these people meant, but it's instead these people are speaking a different language, and what they meant says nothing about what we meant. If I like read a text from 700 years ago, and then if I read a text from 800,000 years ago, and I find out that like those people back then were committed to like Philip relativism, and all of their moral statements were indexed to the values of this one guy named Philip. That says nothing about the semantics of modern day English speakers. It's not the case that we don't know what they mean, but instead what they mean has no bearing on like our semantics. It's irrelevant. That's like even my like colonial realists will accept the cultural contingency of the homeostatic property cluster because it will change from culture to culture. Yeah, like the idea that we only need to know what they're saying for it to be relevant, stupid. It's not what they're saying, it's if we're saying what they're saying and we're not. In the case of the laws, again, the point was laws in the Old Testament are not universally prescriptive. That's what the ceremonial law being pointed out. And in the case of the Ten Commandments,